everyone, and welcome to another episode of Hustle Bunny. I am your host, Miss August Skye. We're back. First podcast of the year.
Absolutely.
And today I have the pleasure of being here with a good friend of mine, author, poet, and adult film creator, Hunter Stallion.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Welcome. It's always nice to have a male performer, male perspective male performer. So welcome.
Thank you.
So kind of talk to us about who you are, what you're about.
Yeah.
That's a big title. You got author, poet.
Right.
Let's kind of start with that.
Just a little about me. I was born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico. There's a huge writing and spoken word scene. So that's kind of where I got my bearings. I do consider myself a full-time adult content creator, but my main passion, vocation is writing and spoken word. And so that's a huge bit of where I come from. And I think I mix a little bit of that story and narrative in my adult content creation. So that storytelling aspect is definitely really huge for me, for sure.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. I was like, when you do like your spoken word and things like that, do you find it to be more sensual?
I feel like the intersection between poetry and pornography is like right there. I feel like it's really intimate. It's really like an autopsy, and you're giving yourself away. And whether you're on a stage or whether you're, on an adult site, like it's very vulnerable. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for both creatives and for people who do sex work or anything related to sex, because that vulnerability is where a lot of power lies, for sure.
Absolutely, that's very well said.
Thank you.
I don't think anyone's ever explained that scenario as well as you did in that one statement.
Thank you.
So kind of talk to us, how did you kind of get yourself into the adult entertainment or adult creator side? Because everyone kind of has like a different story.
So I always joked, even when I was like in high school, that I always wanted to be a porn star when I grew up. Like that was like a running joke, because I was always so enticed by just that world. I thought pornography was so interesting, and growing up very repressed, growing up in central New Mexico, the product of Judeo-Christian Anglicization, my sexuality was something that I was deeply ashamed of. And so for a lot of queer men, pornography is like the first vehicle that we ever experience, a different kind of body, or the body that we like the most. And so that was the safest way for me to do that. And that was a whole gateway for me. And at the time, it wasn't even something scary. It was just, being able to see a man for the first time and not feel ashamed of it. And so that's kind of where it started for me.
Okay, very nice. And how long would it take to you to get like that acceptance? Because I know when people are coming out, whether it be queer, anything that they're doing with themselves. Like for me, I've always had this inclination to want to do sex work. I don't know what it was. I used to always joke. I was like, I always wanted to wear I always wanted to be like a stripper, right? I was like, I always want to wear heels all the time and be like sexy. I was like, I could either be a lawyer and just wear like a tight little pencil skirt, or like play into that fantasy. But I think there's like this deep-rooted sense of understanding who you are as a person, but also being, like you said, ashamed. Because I would feel ashamed about that. Because I remember I was like watching porn at like a young age, not out of like any sort of like sexual desire, but more of just like curiosity and more of like, oh, like these women look like they're having fun, or like they look like they're, they're smiling or they're laughing. Like same thing for like Playboys. So my dad collected Playboys and would keep them around the house, like not around the house, but he would put them in his bedroom.
They were around, yeah.
And I once I found out what they were, I was like, I would like sneak in and like read them and then put them back like perfectly. But I always had like this urge to say like, this is who I am, but it does make you feel a little bit more isolated, because like, do other people feel like this?
Right.
And like for you, it's like, am I sinning? Like, is this like a terrible thing?
Absolutely. And that's kind of the funny thing is like, the more you talk about sex work like openly, the more people are like, I've always wanted to start an OnlyFans, or like I've always wanted. And so it's like, it's more common than you realize. And the more people you talk to, like they're at least curious about it. Like they want to know, they want to ask you questions. And so I think that speaks to like our own nature as just like sexual beings. We're curious, we're voyeuristic, like we like to watch, and sometimes we like to be involved. And I think pornography is a way to do that. And before it was online, it was pamphlets and illustrations, and there's hieroglyphs of people having sex. And so we've always felt the need to document what we do outside of just doing it. And so I find that very interesting, just in terms of like human sexuality.
Yeah. And how long have you been doing OnlyFans and things like that? Did you have any previous work, like working in like camming or any of that? Or was it just like, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, I'm going balls to the wall?
So I think for me, I always liked recording my sexual encounters. I was always just very curious and voyeuristic, and I didn't do it a lot, but it was always kind of like something special that I'd have over the years from really cool encounters with different people, always, consenting, of course. But being able to have that experience really gave me like a taste for being like, I like seeing myself on camera, and I like seeing other people and going back to these encounters more than just thinking about it. And so I remember OnlyFans started kind of like as a diary for me. And I remember long before I actually started doing it like publicly, I would just kind of upload things here and there just so that they were like displays of my sexuality and things that I was really proud of. But it wasn't until about 2 years ago, kind of when the pandemic was doing its thing and we're all kind of getting shaken up, that I really gave it a try. And I also started advertising my stuff, posting on Reddit and making a Pornhub account and really inviting people to see. And almost immediately, people were really attracted to the kind of content that I did. It was very niche and it was very fetish, and so it allowed people to really just kind of zone in on that if they felt like it applied to them. And so that's kind of how I got my start, but officially it was about 2 years ago.
Okay, 2 years ago. Yeah, I feel like the pandemic really put us all into like a position where it's like, all right, well, I'm at home, we'll try something. It's now my time to shine. So kind of talk to us, what is your niche?
So my niche, I would say, would be race play, and I also do a little bit of degradation. The main element that I employ within my pornography is I like to use archetypes and costumes.
Okay.
So my partner, his stage name is Mr. Wasp. And so we're an interracial couple, and so there's always that element in any sort of play that we do. And so I have different elements from police officer uniforms to military uniforms to our most controversial one, which is the red MAGA hat that he sometimes wears. And all of these are meant to represent different archetypes that I either am attracted to or struggle with. And our brand, WaspHunter, is more or less me kind of shadowboxing with those different archetypes. Yeah.
Okay, nice. And for those who don't quite understand what race play is or degradation, is that the right word that I just say?
Degradation. It's a weird
degradation. It doesn't roll off the tongue as like nicely as it should. Kind of explain to people what that is.
Yeah. So I think race play is a very interesting genre because if you look it up like on Pornhub, you won't really get anything. It's kind of somewhere in between. It's kind of a gray zone. And some people like it and some people don't. But I think for me, how I would describe race play is a sexual encounter where you bring your identity to the forefront of the encounter. Whether that's a power play dynamic or just recognizing it. For me, I'm a queer, submissive man of color. I'm Afro-Latino. And there's no way that I can engage in that submission without being somewhat aware of my identity and how it affects different people that I'm attracted to. And because I'm in an interracial relationship and most of my partners have been white men, I have to acknowledge that history and how complicated it can be. And so for me, there's no way that I can indulge in my submission without being aware of that history. And I think that I can't speak for anyone, but I think that most people that are in interracial relationships have to figure out how that works and how the difference in who people are comes together to make a healthy relationship. And so that's a little bit of how I would describe race play, is just bringing it to the forefront.
Okay, very nice. And that's also a very beautiful way to describe it. I'm in an interracial relationship as well too. A lot of my content that comes out, whether I am filming like mainstream or my own content, it always tends to be interracial. And it's not by choice. I don't really have any problems with the content that I create, but it is another thing too, where it's like you do have to, like you said, bring to light what you actually are into, or what's being, how do I say this? What's being put out there, right? What's being sold to people. Because race play, my one time encounter that I had with race play was during the pandemic, and I was camming. And this guy was like, oh, like, are you down for like race play? And I'm like, okay, like I didn't know what it was. So I was like, okay, cool. Like maybe he's gonna call me like your little ebony goddess and all this. Like I was like, oh, it'd be like your little almond roca joy, whatever. No. It was completely opposite. He started dropping like N-bombs and was like, you got to get down and like, worship this like superior white cock. And like for me, like it was so shocking for me that I was like, okay, like this is not the vibe.
For sure. And that's why I think people need to like be mindful of it, because it's like that introducing someone in that sort of way, I wouldn't consider that race play, where it's like there's a right way to go about it and a wrong way, but I feel like with most types of fetishes, it would begin with consent.
Exactly.
And so like thinking of that being your first exposure to it, like that sounds like a terrible experience, and I'm sorry that happened to you.
Yeah.
And it's like, if this person really wanted to like introduce you to race play or was interested, they should have like done a better job describing like what their desires are, or like, hey, I'm interested in a scenario where I'm a superior or I'm this or that, and being able to talk about the role and what it is so that you can decide for yourself, like, am I even interested in that? Like, do I want that? Or maybe you need someone else who's interested in that.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, I think that's a huge element of it, is just like the consent and being able to even ask for what you want. But I think that a big part of race play is, I think the reins needs to be in the hands of people of color, because I think when it comes to language and fantasies, it can be very dangerous if the wrong people use those words, or if they're using it not knowing whether or not the other person wants to hear that kind of language. And so lots of that.
And I probably should have done my research, but like, you know, when you're kind of like, you're in it, you're like, okay, well, this is in the moment. This person wants to do like a private show. I'm like, okay, well, there's money involved.
Yeah,
obviously,
and you always want to
like,
make
it's
someone
gonna
happy.
be, yeah,
and,
exactly. You're trying to, you know, be with your business. So like, that's another reason I wanted to do this episode, is because I just needed a clarification as well too. Cause I know like it can't be, I know there's like there's a fine line, and there is an erogenous zone to it, right?
Course.
There's like this sexual fantasy behind it, and I'm like, I'd like to understand and kind of have a better clarification. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm sure like there's a lot of people too, because like a big thing that's going on in the porn industry is like consent, right?
Of course.
Before we even start filming, we have to go through like a checklist of like your do's and don'ts. You have to do it on camera so people know like what are your safe words, like what do you identify as, different things like that. So I think like with race play comes consent, and I think these two are, you know, hand in hand, and they need to be copacetic. So how were you introduced into race play?
So I think the first thing that I ever saw that I think constituted race play was just a pornography scene. There was a place in San Francisco. It's a very iconic building. It's this bondage building where a lot of queer scenes are filmed. And I remember I was very young. I was maybe like 17, 18 years old, and I saw a scene where it was an interracial scene, and the white man was assuming the dominant role, and he was sitting in like a throne, and he had kind of like a Tom of Finland leather hat on, and he had a submissive of color who was in that role, and he had like a chain around his neck similar to the one that I wear as a token of my submission, and he was licking his boots, and just the whole image was like leaning into the interracial aspect a lot. But you could see that the person in the submissive role was in love with what they were doing, and they were fully empowered by it. And so first of all, I saw that and I was like, I didn't know you were allowed to do that. Like, can you do that? Like, can you like hearken stuff like that? Like, can we invoke slavery? Can we talk about these things in a sexual way? Is that even possible? And so that just asked the question for me, which was already enough. And it made me think about things in different ways, like how do power dynamics in interracial relationships work? Like, you know, as a submissive of color, is it possible for me to be penetrated by someone and me not be the submissive, or can I still have my agency regardless of what role I play in? And so that just really forced me to examine the roles and how people of different colors fit together when they're assuming those roles. Because, you know, you mentioned being in the industry yourself, sometimes we get lumped into these categories even if we don't necessarily want to, right? And like some of the most popular categories in adult entertainment is like ebony or like BBC, and it's like these are typifications on some level, and sometimes we get put in it without wanting to. And so I think for me, race play is really just being able to like own that and like own the color of my skin and be able to call myself, you know, a little Latino slut or a faggot, and to just be able to own that, and like that's how I say it.
Exactly.
And so if I can call you myself that, then I can give other people permission too, and that can actually be a form of empowerment, the way that we sometimes take back words. But at the heart of it is always consent, and when we don't have that, that's when it gets really dangerous, and that's when we give people negative first experiences to these fetishes.
Right, and you know, I think with people of color, the biggest thing is like the typecasting, right? So people are like, when you're like a submissive Afro-Latino, and then I am, you know, obviously African-American Black woman, they're either gonna be like, oh, you should be like the aggressor. Right. You should be like this like super like, it's like, no, I can be soft and dainty. Right. I want to be submissive, and kind of going back to like the slavery and owning that up, right? And so my background is I'm like Congolese and British, right? So it's about 40% British, but when you think about it, it's like, okay, I come from like rape. Like it's like slaves that were raped, right? So the owners, like you look at the family tree and you're like, okay, so this is how I was created. Like, so that kind of goes back into like that whole history of like race play, right? You're like looking at like, okay, like the guy on the throne and like this, it's like, so I look at my history and like when you put 2 and 2 together, you're like, okay, like this is how I got here, you know? But switching up the narrative and like you said, taking back that power and making it something that you want to do and making it say like, oh, this is okay with me.
Absolutely.
You know, instead of people saying, oh, like, okay, like faggot or like these different words, like these terrible things that we tend to say. Even like when it comes to like being Latino or being Black, like you take those words back and say, okay, well, it's not going to affect me anymore. You know?
And I think a big part of that is, again, just kind of the idea of taking power back, because there's a huge element in sex, but specifically BDSM, which is like play therapy, that kind of concept. And so, you know, not to speak for anybody, but there's a large overlap of people within the BDSM community who have also been victims of sexual assault or who have experienced racism or violence. And from the outside, it's like, well, why would anyone want to be near anything that could even resemble their trauma? But, you know, when you kind of explore BDSM, especially the structure of it, you can learn, even within psychology, there is play therapy and there is certain forms of play that can actually be helpful in taking back power or working through scenarios where maybe you didn't have power in that. And so I definitely acknowledge a huge part of that. You know, to be, I think, a brown person in America is to have a lot of racial anxiety. I don't know if it's possible not to have that experience. And for me, one of the ways I could confront that was creating an archetype that represented a lot of the things that I was actually afraid of, and finding a way to literally like wrestle with them in a gladiatorial arena in front of a bunch of people. And in doing that, I realized that my audience was totally different than I thought. I thought I would be more so appealing to the kinds of people that I was attracted to, but really I was appealing more to myself. And among the thousands of people that I've spoke to that have subscribed to me or followed my pages, the response I got is honestly similar to what I got when I was a performance poet, which was like connection, which was like, I've never seen anything like this before. Thank you for making something that represents a fantasy that I had. Like, this was something that lived inside of me that I didn't think that I could like share or talk about, or like it all going back to shame and the fact that so many of us have shame before we have joy, especially with our sexuality or our identities. And so I think that's a huge part of it for sure.
No, absolutely. I love that connection as well too, because it gives people like, you're creating a space, right? Because like you said, like shame is always a big thing. So when you're watching something like, well, I feel embarrassed, like I'm turned on by this, like should I be having like these feelings? Is this person actually really enjoying themselves? You know, there's all of these things that we kind of have to internalize and kind of like take it back out. So I think like you creating that space, because the niches, it's what people want, right? So me and my partner, okay, so I got like a lot of backlash because, okay, well, he just has like a normal size, you know, he just has a normal size dick. Like it's nothing like no porn star dick, but like most men in the world have normal size between like 4 and 6 inch cocks, right? So I would get people that would message and be like, oh my God, like, you know, you can do better. Like you can do bigger. I'm bigger than him. Like, let's make content. Or then there was the majority of people that are like, I love the fact that it's nice because I can relate to this content.
Like,
I can relate to see like, this is real. Like now I know that like girls like you can really do enjoy like being with someone that's like normal, because it's like we all get like this image in our head of it being like, oh, like you have to have like this 8-inch cock to like satisfy any woman,
these
right?
Beauty standards that are just so unrealistic.
Exactly. So creating that space for someone, specific for like race play too, it's like I love the fact that you said that you were using it as like a diary.
Yeah.
And I think that is such a beautiful thing too, because some people like, they're just doing it for like, we're just doing it for money. We're just putting out content. We don't care what, and I get that, hey, hustle, get your bag, be in your bag. That's what it's always about. But I think people see a lot of that genuinity.
Genuineness.
I'm making up words today. What is happening with me? Making up shit today. But that feeling that you're creating, people see that and they're like, thank you for giving me like that experience. It's not just like, oh, I was able to bust a nut. No, I got to experience and immerse myself in something that's like great and wonderful and beautiful.
Yeah. And it hasn't all been like that. You know, there are some people, you know, to be real, I've gotten death threats over the internet, which I've also gotten from doing poetry. So it's just like, it's the same thing, whether I was, you know, talking about white privilege in 2013 and talking about racial injustices, got death threats, or now I'm in an interracial relationship doing things totally different. Like, it's the same thing. I think when you're really on your shit and you're being genuine, I think you can strike nerves with certain people, and sometimes it's the inspirational nerve where people are like, yes, like the connection, and other times it's like the dude in your DM saying like, oh, I can please you so much more than so and so. Like those people sometimes get called to action, but there's so many more people that seem to appreciate it, and that's really, at least for me, what it's all been about.
Yeah, and it's crazy too, because like I started off as like I started off being like a fashion model, right? So nothing with taking my clothes off. Then I did swimwear, and then I did just kind of, my clothes just kept coming off every year that I kept modeling. But I remember this woman, she posted on every single one of my photos, and I think I had just done it was like a swimwear fashion week or something, and I had done posted some photos from it, and this lady had posted in all my photos, I'm gonna kill you, I'll find you, because like I guess her husband or partner or somebody had liked one of my photos. Right. And it's like, no matter what you do, no matter, you're always gonna get, you can please some of the people some of the time, but you can't please people all the time.
It's true. It's true.
It doesn't matter, like getting like the death threats, and it does suck, because you would think that people are going to be more progressive and more liberal nowadays, but no, it's not happening. If anything, with social media and all these different things, it's bringing up a lot of like sediment that's been settled down, right? So things that people have turned a blind eye to, it's all coming to surface, and people are making it more relevant and known. But I guess my next question for you is, how did you get your partner into race play, or were they already into race play? Or
so for my partner, we have like an interesting love story. I always think that the truth of how we met is stranger than the fiction. So I met him on Tinder, and at the time he was a straight guy, had never been with anybody before, and so that was kind of like our first experience. And so everything that we did was kind of new and for the first time. And one of the things that really surprised me about my partner, and I still to this day I honor, was how brave he was. Because even when he was trying to figure out who he was still completely like selfless and like loving me and getting to know me. And I've always respected and admired that about him. But it wasn't until maybe like a year and a half into our relationship that I even really mentioned the race play. I think that there was certain things that I said, or like, wanting to be called certain names, that it kind of leaned in that direction. But it wasn't until we were living together, we were kind of a little bit more settled, that I was just brave enough to ask for what I want, and just to be like, hey babe, like I know this is like really weird, but like I would like for you to do these certain things or say these certain things, because it's helping me work through certain things, and it's related to anxiety that I have, and I want to experience this, and I want you to be the one to do it because I love you and I trust you. And being able to have that was a blessing. And I think that, was he maybe a different person, he might have been like, I can't do that, or I'm not interested in that, and that would have been valid, but he was willing to meet me halfway, and as a result, we were able to create a really amazing experience that we're able to share in front of millions of people, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. I think the whole backdrop of the story is beautiful, right? It's like, I love that. I feel like your fans, I don't know if you share your story with your fans of like how you guys met, or like if you guys are more open. I know some people, they don't mix their their relationship and things like that. But I'm sure how do your fans feel about it? How do they like the whole?
It's really cool. We're able to kind of have our whole relationship kind of be on display. So, we just got back from Virginia. We were there for a whole week, and, being able to like post pictures and our fans be able to comment. We have other people that are in interracial relationships, and they'll send pictures of them, and they'll just be like, we love what you do, and we really appreciate it. And it's been really incredible, and my fans have totally changed my life. Sex work has totally changed my life. Before I started doing any of all this, I was, on unemployment, I was on food stamps, credit card debt, student loans, all of that just 2 years ago, and sex work really gave me a vehicle to change my life. And so I'm really grateful for it, and also for the people that were feeling the same thing that I did at one point or another, and were willing to move past that shame because they wanted to make a connection by seeing this kind of content, which is really what it's about.
Nice, amazing. Do you have any advice for people who would like to start doing race play, or also being like a male performer? We don't have enough male performers.
There is not enough. And
yeah.
I think I would like to, I guess, do a call to action to any man or anyone that identifies with being a man or masculinity. There is a place for you in pornography. It doesn't even have to be related to race play. There is a seat at the table, and I think all bodies are valid, and I think a lot of people are waiting for that call to action to just give it a try. And you don't have to show your face. You don't have to give away your identity. There are ways that you can put a little bit of skin in the game without having to go all the way.
Exactly.
And I think if you want to do it, similar to kind of like how we've always kind of had that desire, that I think most people really know deep down inside if that's what they want. And so, yeah, I encourage you to at least give it a shot if you really think it could be for you.
Yeah, I always want to give people like this space. I'm like, this is the space. Like, I always tell people, like, if you guys want to do it, then do it. And then I always tell people as well that it's not for everybody.
Sure.
And don't feel forced to think that it is for everybody. But I always will say that this is like a place I always support sex work and giving people a space to do sex work. Like you said, whether you identify with anything, whatever your fetish, your kink, as long as you're not hurting anyone intentionally or like abusing somebody, like, you know, all those crazy things. But you know, we all love you. You're welcome here. And I wish there were more men. Like, that's my goal this year. I'd love to find more men who do sex work.
Absolutely.
Just because, you know, women, we love us, but we love to see men get down too. Men love to see men get down. Women love to see men get down just as much as, you know, women are loved and appreciated. So what would you give advice for to anyone who was just going in with a blind eye with no previous sex work experience?
I think the best thing to film and to watch is the kind of content that you're already into. It's the shit that you are already doing. It's already probably in your camera roll on your phone. That's what someone wants to see, because there's nothing more delicious, sexy, and intoxicating than seeing someone enjoy what makes them happy. It does not matter what it is. And I think if you know what that is, or if you found it, you should get as close to it as you possibly can. And if you're the kind of person that wants to be seen while doing it, there are people that want to watch you, and there's people that'll pay you to do it.
Yeah, if there's one thing that never goes out of style, it's porn. Okay, that's if you are a functioning human being and you're able and you're willing and you're okay with your sexuality, you'll never be without work, and you can really change your life around. Not to say like it should be a forever thing, but like if you really do take the steps, you could be doing really well. And I'm glad that you got yourself out of like such a sticky situation, financial situation. Because same thing for myself too. Even taking the steps to starting off being a stripper, sugar baby, it's because like I needed to get myself back on track after, you know, leaving such a harsh relationship and getting dropped on my fucking ass, like, you know, and then you just kind of have to depend on yourself and really get yourself together and like say, hey, like this is what I gotta do. We gotta hustle. We gotta keep it going. I can't sit here and sulk and like, you know, do these different things. But it is always a pleasure.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
I think that this might be another co-host. What do you guys think? I think we need some male inspiration.
I would love to. And this is such a cool spot. And to you and to all the minds that made this happen, I really appreciate it. And it really is a pleasure to be here. So thank you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people want to find you or follow you on social media or find you on OnlyFans and all your websites, you can go ahead and give us all those fun. Give us all the sneaky links.
So if you want to look me up, my adult name is WaspHunter. I'm on Pornhub. I'm on OnlyFans. Anywhere where boy pussy is sold, you can find me. So I'd love to see you, and I'd love to earn your subscription.
Absolutely. Okay, one last question. Is badissi boy pussy? I've been trying to figure that out for like, me and my friend have this badissi.
I feel like the lexicon is very evolving every day. And I feel like there's no right or wrong way. So if you want to use it that way, no one's gonna tell you that you're wrong. Okay,
because we were trying to figure out badissi. I thought it was boy pussy.
I feel like it's a derivative, but I don't even know. Like, I feel like we might have just both learned something today.
Well, we just created a whole nother scenario. But if you want to watch him pop his badissi, those are the links to follow. And it's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
And we look forward to having you back soon. Until then, stay hustling, my little bunnies.
Take care.
Bye.